I think they meant it to be ironic when they put King of the Jews above him. That was Pilate's decision, and the Jewish people didn't really like what they'd done, but they did it all the same. How strange it must have seemed to have that above him as he died on the cross. But today we're going to concentrate on those words that Jesus said as he cries out, "Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing." The day before I got married for the first time, my father and mother were across from Northern Ireland, and my father, they'd been there about 3 or 4 days, and my father got fed up with the creaking upstairs. It was an old house, and he got out a hammer and some nails. I wasn't in at the time. I arrived home to see him running, and I didn't see my father run very often, running up the street in the opposite direction, and hearing my mother at the door saying words to the effect, "You stupid man, you stupid man." Because he thought he knew what he was doing, but he didn't. And the nail not only went through the wood and stopped the creaking, it also went through a copper pipe and started the leaking. And it still makes me smile, the memory of him running up the road. Sometimes we don't know what we're doing. Sometimes it's hard to admit it. Sometimes it's hard to say, yeah, I really don't know what I'm doing. When it comes to DIY, I'm pretty good at saying I don't know what I'm doing. There are things I know I can do. There are things I think I possibly might be able to do, but probably shouldn't. And there are things that I will definitely not touch. And anything to do with mains water, anything to do with mains electricity, no, I just ring Sue at Desford, and she gets a man to come in and sort it out, because it's beyond my pay grade. Something goes wrong with maybe the boiler or something. If it's, in fact, at the moment the boiler sometimes stops working and there's a red light flashes that says reset. Now I feel confident enough to press that button, and I've even instructed Ruth on how to do it. That's how confident I am that it always works in the few times it starts. But Jesus, and when he says they don't know what they're doing, it's at another level. They thought they knew exactly what they were doing. They were getting rid of this annoying man who'd been preaching and teaching, who'd been followed by the ordinary everyday people. The people thought he was great, the leaders not so much. They thought they were getting rid of him. They thought that things would be back to normal once he died. And he cries out on the cross, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Forgiveness is a wonderful thing until you have to forgive someone. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote this: "Lo now, my guest, if aught amiss were said, forgive it and dismiss it from your head. For me, for you, for all, to close the date, pass now the evening sponge across the slate, and to that spirit of forgiveness keep, which is the parent and the child of sleep." Forgiveness is important. Forgiveness really matters. In the midst of his suffering, in the midst of his pain, Jesus chose to offer forgiveness and life while he was in the midst of death. Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Oh, they continued to mock him. They continued to mock him. But still he cries to his Father to forgive them. How hard that must have been. How hard it must have been to pray to God to forgive the people who were even then abusing him. And yet somehow we manage to believe sometimes that we could possibly do something or say something or have an attitude that he is not willing to forgive. In the midst of his pain, as he dies on the cross, he says, Father, forgive them. It's the work of the enemy, the one who stands against God, to point the finger and to say, you terrible person, who do you think you are? I've talked to people down through the years, and all the years I've been a minister and some of the time I wasn't, who say, oh no, I couldn't go to church, I'm not good enough to go to church. I think I've said here before, you should meet my congregation. Desperate, obviously, I mean, don't I? No. But it's a lie that we tell ourselves, and that we allow ourselves to think that anything we've been or said or thought or done is beyond God's forgiveness. And yet, even as people scream out, even as people make fun of Jesus, he asks his Father to forgive them. And so he cries out for us. In those moments when we think we've gone too far, in those moments when we think we've done too much, in those moments when we think we're just not good enough, he says, Father, forgive him, forgive her. And he says of me and he says of you, they don't really know what they're doing. And there are times we don't, aren't there? There are times when we say things or we do things and the regret comes almost immediately, but you can't take them back. And it's proved yet again the lie that is that old saying that we always used to say when we were children, sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Oh, how wrong that is. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but they heal. And sometimes the words that have been said to us or the words we've said to others just don't seem to, do they? But God forgives us anyway. God forgives us anyway. And as he dies on the cross, and as he gives that forgiveness, so he calls us to give forgiveness as he did, as his followers. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Oh, sometimes we're tempted to think that those who have wronged us knew exactly what they were doing and knew exactly what they wanted to do as they hurt us. But perhaps, like those men who cried out against Jesus, they didn't really know what they were doing. If one of the things I've learned in life is that when someone's horrible to you, or someone does something hurtful, there's something behind it. It may not be something that you've done or that I've done. It may be the pain of things that were done to them or of what happened to them in an earlier period in their life. Perhaps we'll never know. But they don't really know what they're doing. And God calls us to forgive them. God calls us to forgive as we've been forgiven. The Lord's Prayer that we said together, forgive us as we forgive those who sin against us. And if you knew me well enough, you might be tempted to cry out, but Duncan, you don't understand. You don't know what it's like. And the truth is, I don't. But God does. There was a woman in the Second World War. She was Dutch. She and her family hid Jews in the walls, false walls of their house. Her name was Corrie. Her sister's name was Betsy, and someone turned them in. And they were taken into custody and they were sent to a concentration camp, along with the Jews that they'd been sheltering. And at that camp, her sister Betsy died. And after the war was over and Corrie was released, she began to go round the cities of Europe talking about the need for forgiveness. And she writes this: "It was at a church service in Munich that I saw him, the former SS man who'd stood guard at the shower room in the processing centre at Ravensbrück. He was the first of our actual jailers that I'd seen since that time, and suddenly it was all there, the room full of mocking men, the heaps of clothing, Betsy's pain-blanched face. He came up to me as the church was emptying, beaming and bowing. 'How grateful I am for your message, Fräulein,' he said. 'To think that, as you say, he has washed my sins away.' His hand was thrust out to shake mine, and I, who preached so often to the people in Bloomendal the need to forgive, kept my hand at my side. Even as the angry, vengeful thoughts boiled through me, I saw the sin of them. Jesus Christ had died for this man. Was I going to ask for more? 'Lord Jesus,' I prayed, 'forgive me and help me to forgive him.' I tried to smile. I struggled to raise my hand. I could not. I felt nothing, not the slightest spark of warmth or charity. And so again I breathed a silent prayer. 'Jesus, I cannot forgive him. Give me your forgiveness.' As I took his hand, the most incredible thing happened. From my shoulder along my arm and through my hand, a current seemed to pass from me to him, while into my heart sprang a love for this stranger that almost overwhelmed me. And so I discovered that it is not our forgiveness any more than on our goodness that the world's healing hinges, but on his. When he tells us to love our enemies, he gives, along with the command, the love itself. You know, I identify with Corrie, but with the first bit. The bit where she said she couldn't feel forgiveness. The bit that realizes it's hard sometimes to let go. But what she did and how she changed, as she says, wasn't because she was some very special person, though she was, but because of the love of God for her. That's the love that took Jesus to the cross, that took Jesus rising from the dead and into glory. That's why he came. Very soon, as you'll know now, it's Advent, and we prepare for Christmas, and we think again of Jesus as the Christ child. But he came with a purpose, to transform our lives one by one by one. And on that day, when Jesus died, there were two people with him. Two thieves. Two thieves who had a very different reaction to what Jesus had to say and what Jesus was doing. One lashed out in pain and agony and said, "What sort of Messiah are you? Save yourself and save us." And he cursed him. And perhaps we can understand why he did what he did. The pain he was in, the agony, the fact that he knew that he was going to die, and so was this man beside him who people believed was the Messiah, who the sign said King of the Jews above his head. And he abuses him and he turns away from him. And then there's the other man. Both of them knew that they were going to die. Both of them knew that what they'd done was wrong. Both of them knew that Jesus didn't need to die, but only one of them had the faith and the courage to say, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Remember me when you enter your kingdom. And in his pain and in his agony and in his despair, he did the exact opposite to what the other thief did. You know, sometimes life takes us by surprise. Sometimes it's for good and sometimes it's for bad. And God reaches out his hand, as Jesus did, in a sense, to the people around him. And as he cried out, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. And we have a choice to make. We can, as it were, well, with his words, the man was able to reach out, if not with his hands, and say, remember me. And Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise. Now, this is Jesus. He doesn't say words of false comfort. He doesn't say things that aren't true. Here's a man who, well, if you got crucified by the Romans, you'd been a fairly bad person to get crucified. And with those simple words, remember me when you come into your kingdom, he has the promise of God, today you'll be with me in paradise. It's not complicated, this Christianity thing. Oh, how we complicated it. And we have in the last 2,000 years. We've made it all kinds of things. And you have to do all sorts of stuff. And you have to be this and you have to be that. And follow this way and follow that way. When actually, all we need is to say to the King, remember me. Remember me. Forgive me. I need your forgiveness. That forgiveness that you've been offering. I need that forgiveness. And that's all it takes. Simple and straightforward. And so whatever our situation and however we feel about God and whatever's going on in our lives, today at this end of the church year, as we begin next week again to look at the life of Christ and to think of all the things that happened to him from his beginnings through the time of Lent and of Easter and on to the Ascension Day. Let's remember that thief on the cross. In human terms, I would dare to say, fairly confidently, that thief was a worse person than you. Okay? I think we can be fairly, in human terms, I think, he was an outcast from society and he'd been a very naughty boy. But also, he had less time to go. But as he hung there, he found new life. He didn't have any time to make up for it. He didn't have any time to put things right. He didn't have any time to go back to the people that he'd wronged and say, will you forgive me? Can I make some sort of restoration? He had no time for any of that. And still he found forgiveness from God. So don't tell me. And don't let anyone tell you that God doesn't want to forgive you and forgive me. I find it hilarious how people react when they find out I'm a minister. I was a chaplain for the Air Training Corps at one point, and quite genuinely, I'd walk into a room and one of them would say, no swearing, Padre's here. Or if they did, they'd go, oh, sorry, Padre. Oh, yeah. As if somehow I was some perfect being, who lived in this bubble. They got to know after a while. Yes, thank you, dear. Yes. And sometimes, we think to ourselves, and folk out there think that you've got to be like that to be part of a church and to follow God. No. All we need is the reaction of that thief on the cross. Will you forgive me? And then begins a time when we begin to follow him. Not to somehow earn what he's done for us, but because we're grateful. There are some people in this world who, without thinking about it, if they said help, I would automatically say, what do you want? Where do you want me to be? When do you want me to be there? There are people in this world that I owe a debt of gratitude to that will go beyond anything I can ever repay. But there is one that I have gratitude to that is beyond all of that. For he knows me. He understands me. He's seen all I am and all I've done. And still he loves me. Still he forgives me. And I'm a Baptist minister because he said to me, go on then, tell other people about it. And a couple of times I've said, do I really have to? But you know, that I didn't have a choice because of the gratitude that I have for him. Christ is King. Even on the cross, with him on the cross and the thief on the cross, he makes a promise that he would keep. And so he will with us. Let's pray.